The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and baked apples, and my son's laughter could be heard throughout the house. After turning off the oven timer, I smiled at our treasured Sunday routine, which had become sacred to us and was a habit I had held dear ever since I adopted Ethan. He didn't know the full tale since I was simply his mother, which was sufficient. My gaze shifted to the window, where the frost-covered garden was illuminated by the feeble December sunshine. As a child, I recall his little hand firmly gripping mine. The recollection seemed distinct and distant, like a beloved photograph tucked in an album that had been forgotten. Ethan was now 19 years old. He was tall, had wide shoulders, and smiled readily, yet he was powerful in a subtle manner. He couldn't fathom how profoundly he had impacted my heart. When Ethan went through the threshold, his hair was tangled, and his sweater was slightly off-center. The timer went off, and I glanced up. "Mom, that smells wonderful," he remarked, leaning on the frame. "That's just because you're hungry," I joked as I removed the apple pie from the oven. His laughter made me happy since it was a pleasant, youthful sound. He acknowledged he was guilty. These moments were especially meaningful to me because they reminded me of how much his presence had filled the hole. My husband David departed a long time ago after doctors verified what I already suspected: I couldn't have children. My life broke apart when he left, but while David saw the end, I saw the opportunity to start anew. Ethan was the thing that kept my wounded heart together. His phone rang while we were eating, but he ignored it completely. He was just thinking about me. "Have you any plans today?" I asked. He said that he was simply working on a project and brushed his hand through his hair before maybe going for a run. "How about you?" I shrugged. "As usual, maybe clear out the attic. Need assistance." He gave it. I turned my head away. "I got it. It is all about school. I really wanted the attic all to myself." I wasn't ready to reveal the memories stored in the dusty boxes. I was terrified that secrets would undermine the life we'd created together. I adored Ethan as my kid, but I frequently wondered how he would react if he learned the truth. How does he view me now? Feel deceived? That afternoon, I went up the creaking steps to the attic. As I pulled the chain to illuminate the room, the cold brushed my fingertips. As I sorted through boxes of photos, baby outfits, and adoption papers, the scent of old paper and wood permeated the room. I discovered a photo of Ethan as a newborn among the things from my meticulously curated existence. His wide blue eyes were staring at the camera. My chest clenched as I remembered how much I loved him and saw him covered in a blanket in the adoption agency's nursery. The social worker had informed me that he may be a challenging kid since he was delivered prematurely to a young mother with little money and no plans to return. But I thought Ethan was excellent. "Mom," I was shocked by his voice and almost dropped the photo. Ethan stood at the doorway frowning. "How did you get up here?" I placed the photo down and said, "I'm just going through some old stuff." He took a step closer, his eyes bright with curiosity. "May I help you?" "Not at all." I intended for the term to sound harsher than it did. I dropped my voice. "Really, it's simply uninteresting crap. It would make you ill." He remained still, his gaze fixed on a box next to me. "What's inside?" As he grabbed for it, my heart raced. "Ethan, please?" His expression was worried as he froze. "What's happening?" I opened my lips to speak, but no words came out. How can I describe how weighty my silence is? How could I speak the truth without causing us to break apart? Instead, I offered her a faint grin. Just some old documents that I remembered but hadn't looked at in years. Ethan gazed at me for a while before nodding. "Okay." But as he walked away, I saw a tinge of uncertainty in his eyes. I stood at his doorway that night, watching him as the usual pang of guilt sank in. I knew I needed to tell him the truth, but I was terrified to. I walked into my room and placed the photo of Ethan as a newborn on my nightstand. As I glanced at the frame's corners, my thoughts turned to David's peaceful departure, the challenges of adoption, and the joy of Ethan's first steps. I was largely thinking about the commitment I made when I brought him home. Love him no matter what. I've maintained my secret for the time being. My son's name was Ethan. I would tell him everything one day when the moment was appropriate. Until that moment, I allowed myself to believe in our relationship without expressing it. A tie stronger than blood, founded on love and trust. The brief winter days changed into lengthy, tranquil evenings. Inside our house, a new rhythm began to emerge. We watched movies, tried new foods, and laughed together, which made the gap between us seem more comfortable. I couldn't ignore the way I viewed him now. His jaw was set while he was paying attentively. His grin caused his eyes to glow. A mother should not worry about these issues all the time. They remained in my memory like thorns that refused to go away. How about a movie night? One night Ethan phoned from his living room. I took a blanket from the hall closet and said, "Only if I get to pick." He gave a loud groan. "Okay, but if it's another dreary drama, I'll prepare some popcorn to pass the time." He dropped down next to me as I giggled and snuggled into the sofa. "You need to try more things. Something does not have to be explosive in order to be enjoyable." I made fun of them. He smiled at me. "Things become better when there are explosions." There was a pleasant silence as the film began. The soothing illumination on the television made his face seem warm. Between the opening credits and the main event, I felt his arm rest on the back of the sofa. Even though he did it all the time, the touch on my shoulder made my heart skip a beat. I convinced myself it was nothing more than an accidental touch. But the feeling persisted, causing me to think of inappropriate things. He released grip of my arm as I shifted slightly to make the blanket fit better. I spotted him looking at me from the corner of my eye. His face had an unfathomable expression. "Are you okay, Mom?" His voice was weak as he asked. I quickly nodded. Of course, we're simply growing accustomed to it. Even though he didn't push, the tension between us seemed like static in the air. When the credits rolled, I feigned a yawn. "It's bedtime for me," I murmured as I rose up to fold the blanket. "Do not remain up beyond midnight." He said, "Good night, Mom." And his gaze remained on me for a minute longer than normal. The following morning, Ethan surprised me by helping me clean up the garage. Ethan seldom takes the initiative on Saturdays. What began as a job soon turned into a lot of giggles as we searched through old items. He handed out an old fading photo of me and said, "Hey, check this out. I'm Mom. You were so cute." I rolled my eyes and pulled the photo away from him. "Thank you, I believe." He leaned on the workbench laughing, "But it's weird to imagine you were my age." "It seems like you've always been Mom." I paused because the words I wanted to say were becoming lodged in my throat. It was in my heart to tell them the true story of how we formed a family. But I didn't want to lose this opportunity. I grinned. Instead, I wasn't born into middle age. Believe it or not, I had a few insane days. Not a chance. I giggled as I smacked him with the photo. "Oh, now I've heard of it." He ducked and grinned. "Okay, do not tell anybody." He should know, however. By the evening, the garage was a bit less disorganized. I also ordered us takeaway to celebrate our hard effort. The heater was gently humming in the background while we ate at the kitchen table. This is when Ethan's phone rang on the table. He stared at it momentarily before turning it off. I inquired, not expecting a response. "It's not significant, however." He shrugged. "Just a pal." I gazed at him for a bit and saw that his cheeks were somewhat crimson. "Boyfriend, I made fun of them." He rapidly shook his head. "Not like that. Going on dates isn't really my thing." Oh, I tried to pretend like nothing was happening, but the tremendous comfort I felt made my stomach throb. He stared into my eyes for too long and murmured, "It just seems complicated." However, certain individuals are worth it. All of a sudden, the room became smaller. There was unstated tension between us. As I grabbed for my water glass, I glanced aside. "Make sure the individual you meet is suitable for you when you meet them," Ethan remarked with a weird grin. I arched an eyebrow to conceal how amused I was by him. When the tension dissolved, laughing erupted. But the moment lingered with me and formed a part of my memories. That night after Ethan had gone to bed, I strolled around the empty home by myself. Moonlight filtered in through the windows, casting lovely shadows. I paused and looked inside since his door was open. He was totally sleeping, and the dark lighting made his face seem serene. As I stood there, my chest tightened, and I felt as if a torrent of emotions I couldn't identify was ready to strike me. Ethan was my son in every aspect, despite the fact that he was not my biological son. But we had changed, and while I observed him, I couldn't help but notice that my heart was responding in unexpected ways. I immediately turned aside, returned to my room, and placed my hand on my chest. This was incorrect. It was inappropriate to feel this way. As my son, I had loved and cared for him for years. But somewhere along the road, the boundaries had blurred, and I wasn't sure how to mend them. Ethan noticed me in the morning holding a steaming cup of coffee and staring out the kitchen window. "Are you okay?" he inquired with concern in his voice. I forced a grin while wondering what it was about. He moved forward. After hesitating, I shrugged life view. He answered yes, and a warm grin appeared on his lips. Ethan, you're all grown up now. It feels like I just showed you how to tie your shoes yesterday. His expression softened, and the words he uttered ripped straight through me. Mom, I am not the same person without you. His remarks weighed hard on my heart and made me want to cry. I turned aside and focused on the enough anymore. As winter gave way to spring-like signals, we joked more at home, and our friendship developed unexpectedly. Ethan began to see me more often, not simply for casual conversations, but also for comfort and companionship. When he gazed at me for an extended period of time at dinner or stroked my arm in the kitchen, I felt both love and dread. We were sitting next to one another on the sofa, one calm evening, when his arm brushed mine. I felt his warmth. Even though we were near, my heart was beating, so I forced myself to gaze straight ahead. Mom, his voice was unsteady as he said, "Are you okay?" I shook my head too fast. Of course, why shouldn't I be? He glanced at me and said, "You seem different lately." There was anxiety in his eyes as well as something else I couldn't identify from a distance. His gaze made it difficult for me to grin. Ethan. I'm okay truly. He didn't seem to be certain, but he said nothing else. Instead, he stretched out to touch my hand. The simple deed shocked me. It was a bond that made her feel both protected and afraid. Keeping the truth hidden became more difficult. The adoption papers stashed in the attic made me feel compelled to act quickly because they were set to go off. One night as the sun set, I discovered Ethan in the living room. The home was a light gold hue. He was seated near the window, a book on his lap, his long legs stretched wide. When I went in, he glanced up and grinned so fiercely that it tugged at my chest. "Hey," he said as he laid down the book. "How are you?" I had no idea what to do, and my trembling hands were hanging onto the back of a chair for support. "Ethan, let's chat." His grin faded, and he sat up straighter. "What is wrong?" I instantly replied. "There is nothing wrong," even though the knot in my throat said otherwise. "I simply wanted to share something with you that I should have told you a long time ago." He had a scowl on his face and leaned forward to give me his whole attention. "Okay, what is it?" I drew a feeble breath in, since the words weighed heavily on my chest. "You have been adopted." There was suddenly a deafening quiet. At first his expression did not alter. It seemed that the words had not yet touched him. Then his eyes gradually grew larger, and his lips expanded slightly. Taken in, his voice scarcely rose above a whisper as he repeated it. I agreed, but tears filled my eyes. "Ethan, you have always been my son. You were mine as soon as I held you. I did not give birth to you, however." He gave me a look of astonishment and amazement. "Why didn't you tell me?" I told them I was terrified, and my voice shook. "I didn't want you to believe you were not good enough. I did not want you to feel anything, so take a break. In all vital ways, you are my son." I felt my heart tear as he turned away, his jaw tightening. I sat down next to him and stretched out to shake his hand, but he did not answer. Ethan, I spoke so gently that you could hardly hear me say anything. I was surprised to find tears lingering in his eyes. When he returned to me, he remarked in tears, "You're the only mother I've ever known." "It is still the same." I exhaled shakily, feeling relieved. He then added, "But it does explain some things." My heart pounded quickly. "What do you mean?" He considered for a minute. Then his gaze fastened on mine. "How I feel about you right now. It is not the same." We didn't want to express our emotions, but the air between us became thick with them. My hands shook in my lap as I gulped deeply. "Hey, Ethan, you are my son." He spoke hurriedly, his voice rising. "I adore you, but not just as a son. That is not how I have ever loved you. No, not really." I muttered to Ethan, but my voice cracked. "This is not correct." He looked into my eyes and replied, "Maybe it is, but I cannot change how I feel." My chest expanded, and a wave of emotion was ready to strike me. "That is not what you mean," he replied. I do, keeping his gaze riveted on her. "I suppose you are also feeling it." I looked away, unable to look into his eyes. It was too hazardous and painful to speak the truth. "Ethan, this is difficult to grasp, but just because it is confusing does not mean it is not true." He continued, dropping his voice. "Mom, I don't think I'll ever feel like this about anyone else." His comments devastated my heart, and tears streamed down my cheeks. Ethan, I adore you more than you'll ever realize. He stretched out and grasped my hand gently but firmly. We will figure it out together. I shook my head, allowing tears to pour. I said it again and over, you are my son, as if that will make my emotions go away, and you are everything to me. He said, I remember sitting there for a long time with nothing else going on around us. I had no idea what would happen next, or how we would get out of our current situation. But as I gazed into his eyes, I saw the love and desire that had grown between us over the previous weeks. I allowed myself to ponder for the first time if love, no matter how difficult, could ever be enough. The days that followed were close to flawless. During our time together, we felt several feelings that neither of us really comprehended. Ethan's conduct shifted subtly but noticeably. Things that were little at first came to signify more. He lingered in the kitchen after breakfast, his fingers brushing mine as he grabbed for a dish, or his gaze rested on me a bit longer. He began to compliment me more often. They didn't appear mean at first when they mentioned how excellent my meal was, or how gorgeous my residence was. But his voice had a new depth that made my cheeks flush scarlet. I could sense him before I saw him one morning, while sipping my coffee by the window. He stepped behind me and his warmth filled the gap between us. Morning, Mom, he whispered quietly with a warmth that I had not heard before. Good morning, I murmured, my voice somewhat faint. He began with, You know, I believe I have already told you how lovely you look in this light. His remarks were as sweet as an embrace. I remained frozen, unsure what to say. My heart is racing with a combination of astonishment and thankfulness. When I turned to face him, I sought for a glimmer of amusement in his expression, but I just saw serious, steady eyes. I began to say Ethan, but he interrupted me with a pleasant grin. He said, I mean it. Mom, you look lovely. You've always been his term, and it lingered with me long after he fled in the morning. I had not heard that type of conversation from anybody in years. Since David's departure, no Ethan seemed to view me as more than simply a mother, as someone attractive and significant in her own right. I was terrified when I realized it. It also made me feel something I hadn't felt in years, the need to stand out. That night, Ethan arrived at the door carrying my favorite flower, a bouquet of lilies. I was taken aback when he handed them out. His grin was a combination of pride and timidity. Why are you doing this? I inquired for no apparent reason, despite his plain remarks. The warmth in his eyes indicated that they were everything but. I was busy arranging the flowers in a vase while my mind was preoccupied with emotions I wasn't prepared to confront. As Ethan leaned against the counter, my hands began to tremble slightly. He stared at me so intensely that my cheeks became crimson. He continued in a calm, quiet voice, You deserve to be cared for. Thank you for everything you do for me, and you should have someone do something for you. His comments made me feel better, like honey sweet and comforting, and tears began to gather around the corners of my eyes. I said thank you, but my speech was difficult to hear since I avoided staring at him. As I approached, I told him it wasn't kind. This is the truth. What occurred next strengthened his affection for the following 3 days. At first, Ethan assisted me with tasks I was accustomed to completing on my own. He mended the squeaky garage door, cleaned the gutters, and carried the groceries, despite the fact that they were not heavy, and no one asked him to. A lot more of his touches occurred. He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek as he went by in the kitchen. His embraces lingered, and his hand brushed mine when we sat on the sofa together. He placed his arms around me and made me feel protected. I couldn't deny how much his presence improved my mood, or how warm he made me feel. Ethan came outside with 2 cups of tea one day, while sitting on the porch with a book in his hand, and the early spring light warming up the air. He handed it to me and sat down softly, pressing his shoulder to mine. Are you reading anything good? He inquired in a pleasant, light tone. I held out the book and remarked, This is an old favorite. He grinned as he glanced at the cover. That one was always your favorite. Do you remember? Yes. I remember everything about you. His words hung between us, full of meaning we could not express aloud. He glanced at me and his eyes met mine, causing my heart to beat. I felt weak because of how intensively he stared at me, as if he could see every thought and emotion I had tried so hard to conceal. I began to say Ethan, but the words would not come out. He stretched out and grasped my hand gently. He added in a gentle voice, "You don't have to say anything. I want you to understand how much I cherish and adore you." Nodding, I could not say anything. He took my hand to his lips and gently kissed my knuckles. I felt a chill at how gently they touched me, so I quickly removed my hand and placed down my coffee to do something else. The shift in our connection was too clear to ignore. Ethan's displays of devotion beyond what one could anticipate from a mother and son. I tried to convince myself it wasn't harmful, but something within me knew it wasn't. I still couldn't push him away. I had no idea I was missing anything while he was there, and the idea of losing his warmth and care aches so deeply. Ethan walked up behind me one night while I was preparing supper on the stove. He placed his delicate hands on my shoulders and stroked me in a forceful yet soothing manner. He asked me whether it had been a hard day, and his voice sounded similar to mine. I told him just a bit. My breath caught as his fingers began to massage the tension out of my shoulders. He replied in a hushed voice, "You do too much." His hands move in slow, methodical circles. "For a change, you should allow me care for you." I felt warm inside after hearing what he said, so I closed my eyes and relished the moment he abruptly cut Ethan off. "You do not have to. I want it. You have helped me in every way. You have given me love, a life, and a place to live. Now it is my time to repay you." As I turned to face him, he placed his hands on my arms. His gaze were piercing, and the serious expression on his face made my chest constrict. He told his mother in a quiet voice, "You're my world, and I'll do anything to make you happy." As I gazed at him, tears welled up in my eyes. I was experiencing a maelstrom of love, terror, and desire. I reached up and brushed a stray hair away from his forehead. My hand remained on his forehead for longer than it should have. I murmured, "You have already made me happy." My voice cracked. As we gazed at one other, time seemed to stand still for a second. The air between us was thick with sentiments we didn't express. He leaned forward gently and softly kissed my cheek. He held his lips on mine for too long, and when he drew away, his eyes peered at me as if he was waiting for a sign. I wasn't sure what to say or do. I was just aware that Ethan was no longer my son. He was now everything for me.